Welcome back to Peace and Justice Beyond BBL. Still with us, Congressman Rufus Rodriguez, Chief Peace Negotiator Miriam Coronel Ferrer, Professor Abud Sayed Linga from the MILF panel, and live from the Senate, Senator Bongbong Marcos, and here in the studio, Gus Miklat, Head of Initiatives for International Dialogue and convener of All Out Peace. Let me just, before we move to the topic of this segment, let me just zero in on the opt-in provision of the BBL, the draft BBL, the original draft BBL that allowed certain territories or certain local government units to join into uh, the Bangsamoro region later on after the plebiscite. Let me go first to Senator Marcos in the Senate. Senator, what have you done, or what has the Senate done in terms of the opt-in provision in the BBL?
Well, as originally proposed, we have an opt-in provision, but only for the very first plebiscite. And after the first plebiscite the votes have been counted for the first plebiscite, there is no longer any option to join the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. And the reason that we have done this is really quite simple. We cannot have a local government unit, or we cannot have an regional government which is continuously changing its borders, continuously changing its definition, because the administration of that is almost, it would be a nightmare, it would be impossible to do. Secondly, the original opt-in provision allowed non-contiguous local government units to opt in, or to ask for a plebiscite. Again, the administration of non-contiguous areas is simply impossible. And so we just removed the non-contiguous areas that were included in the original draft of the BBL, because there was no way that we could do that. There is also a constitutional question on the opt-in provision, because the Constitution speaks of defining the different local government units, and once defined, that is what they are. So these are the different issues that surrounded the opt-in provision. There were other arguments that were made that maybe if there is an opt-in provision, there should be an opt-out provision. Okay. Just to make it properly symmetrical. But again, that would cause all kinds of problems in terms of the administration, where the constituency of the autonomous region is continuously changing. Mm-hmm. That is something that that we could not find a solution for. I had discussions with Professor Ferrer on this, and was asking for suggestions on how we handle it. And after asking her and many of the other experts on public administration, we simply could not find a way to actually rationally administer those areas.
Okay, Professor, have you found, since the time you talked to Senator Marcos?
Maybe, as a matter of principle, all local governments can, in accordance with law, change their boundaries, reconstitute themselves into different units in accordance with law. And of course, some guidelines provided.
It's on this matter, but let me ask first, Mr. Miklat. Let's go to the public and then the local sentiments, about BBL. We've seen a number of surveys saying that while on the national level there is somewhat little acceptance, 28, low 30s, but locally in the core areas there seems to be huge acceptance. Is that also your based on your studies?
I think so. Yeah. I think it does resonate what is on the ground, but clearly I'd like also to point out that even in the national study, what is also huge is the undecided. And this is the constituency that we need to, I think, reach out to. And I think they are the ones who are the silent majority. But I'd like to also make a point about the BBL being a product only of the two parties. It is not. While, of course, it is the product of tedious negotiations between the two principals, the government and the MILF. But behind them or with them have been peoples even, in this not only 17 years of negotiations, but in the decades of negotiations between these two entities. So I'd like to stress that the constituency of this BBL should not just be limited to the discussions of the legislators and of the senators and of the panelists, but people on the ground need to be part of this conversation because it's about them. Both government and the rebels wage war in the name of the people. They also wage peace in the name of the people. But sometimes the people are not there on the table. Sometimes, of course, but now we see in the BBL, at least in the original version, we feel that it does more or less reflect the aspirations of the majority, as you say. And it's reflective in the survey that you just cited. And so, yes, it does reflect the sentiments of the people in the Bangsamoro area and also in Mindanao.
Of course, the government
people in the Bangsamoro area and also in Mindanao.
Of course, the government peace panel has had a number of consultations, hindi po ba, Professor? Are they yielding the same results in terms of what the stakeholders want to say? Because obviously the product of those consultations from the three groups, the government peace panel and the House and the Senate, are different.
Well, Congress, the House Committee, had no less than 50 consultations, including hearings in Mindanao. And before MAP, we always would look at this and organize that, of course, to the FAB and the CAB. We should approve. And therefore, in our voting in the ADO committee, we have seen that certain provisions should be deleted, some with a mandatory language, so that this will conform to the Constitution. And so that is what we have. We have more than 40 deletions and a mandatory language. And MLF wrote to the Speaker that 28 of those should be restored. So that is what we have right now.
Which ones did you want restored, Professor?
I think a lot have to be restored, but one example is the right of control over natural resources, as one example, which was taken from the original word. Another is there are some provisions which are actually in the exclusive power of the Bangsamoro, which is being transferred to exclusive
To the national government.
yes, to the
Reserve powers of the
power.
national government.
Yes, but that's what in the Senate, particularly in the Senate version. So to us, what are defined in the is reserve, in the exclusive and concurrent should be retained as it is. There should be no juggling of this power because these are in the agreement. Yeah. So these are examples of.
Okay, we will see if there's a way that this can be restored. Are you optimistic, Congressman Rodriguez?
Frankly, not. You see, the voting of the ad hoc committee was precisely to ensure that the substitute bill would not contain possible violations of the Constitution. That's the reason why we got 50. There were those who were against but voted for the substitute bill because there have been changes. If there were no changes, practically it will have very, very slim margin of those in favor. But we had a vote of 50 over 17, and the reason for that is because they saw the amendments that we have introduced. And so if we are going to give in to the 28, the request of the MILF for 28 provisions of the 40 plus that we have removed, then we will again go to the same problem of having a bill that may be approved but may be declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And secondly, we will lose the votes again, and we will have a problem in the plenary because many have already supported this bill because of the amendments and the deletions.
Let me go to. I'm sorry, Professor. You wanted to say something?
No, on the question of constitutionality, I think it's only the Supreme Court can make a decision on the constitutionality of a certain provision. If that will happen, then we can ask the BTC, the Bangsamoro Transition Commission, to perform its second function, and that is to recommend constitutional amendments, because that becomes necessary.
Just on that, because many would say that just approve this and let the Supreme Court decide on constitutionality. No. We are duty-bound in Congress to pass what we believe is constitutional and never to approve anything which we believe to be unconstitutional. And it was the decision of the ad hoc committee, which we believe will be supported by the plenary when we vote, that we take this out. And therefore, we are saying the argument of, just approve this. Can we just have a blind eye on these items that are constitutional? No, we should uphold our duty to only pass constitutional laws based on our own determination of the bill.
Okay, before we continue with this particular point on this discussion, let's take a question from the audience. We have Sonny Santos, Social Media and People Management Strategist. Sonny?
Good evening. My question is, what is the assurance that the would-be Bangsamoro government will remain secular and that it will be fair to all affected residents regardless of faith?
Now, the assurance is the BBL itself, because that is the law that will govern the Bangsamoro territory.
Professor, would you like to elaborate on that? Professor Ferrer?
Well, I would agree. And obviously, it conforms with the Constitution that the Bangsamoro government be a secular form of government.
Yes, it's found in the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. You have changed the title of the bill and what it really should reflect. And this is the Bangsamoro is a region of our country. It cannot just be Bangsamoro, a nation of Moros. No, we are the Constitution provides only for autonomous regions. That's why we have changed, and the Senate has also followed suit that it will be called the basic law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region. Now, the equality of treatment, the equality of rights are found in the BLBAR. That everyone in the Bangsamoro will have the same rights, privileges, and also the duties in that area. Protected. The Christians are protected, the Lumads are protected, the IPs, they're all protected. And so therefore, we assure you it's a very secular, it has no discrimination as to race, creed, religion, or whatever sectoral you belong, whatever sector. And it is secular. In fact, we have removed the Wali. The Wali is removed because the Wali in Iran was the first fundamental Islamic state. And a Wali signifies that he is both head of the government and he's also head of the church. And therefore, we have removed that wali. And so therefore, these are badges of what we call non-secularism, which we have removed. And so we assure you that the substitute bill of the House will afford equal treatment and rights to all inhabitants in the Bangsamoro.
Let me go to Senator Marcos. Senator, would you like to answer the question? What is the assurance?
Well, certainly, I am confident that the substitute bill that I have filed is one of the elements that we had removed, because there were overtones of religious overtones that were introduced by the introduction of a wali. And that the wali is as I understand it, someone who is a student of the Quran, who is close to God, who has an understanding of religious issues. And that's why it was felt that just to simplify matters, make it very clear that it is a secular government that we are trying to put together in the basic law for the Bangsamoro region. I just like to go back to a point that was made earlier, and I must contest the assertion that this process was inclusive. And this is not a conclusion that I arrived at myself. Came out during the hearings when we asked other stakeholders, because it clearly there were only two panels: the government panel and the MILF panel. There were no other panels besides those two. And so when we asked the sultanates, we asked the business communities, we asked the LGUs, we asked the IPs, we asked the women's groups, we asked very many different groups about, first of all, do you recognize the MILF as your representative at these talks? And the answer was always no. Did you authorize the MILF to be your representatives? And again, the answer was always no. So clearly, at least it is their feeling that they were not consulted. And that's why we added on a number of hearings so that they could be given an opportunity to come and say their piece and raise whatever issues and objections, and that's what we have allowed them to do. And that's why many of the changes were to take into account the points that they brought up. And that is why I feel that they have better representation now than they had in the draft BBL.
Thank you, Senator. Gus, Mr. Mitlat, would you like to respond?
I don't think that each and every person in Bangsamoro and even in Mindanao or this country was consulted on this, but there was a fairly, I think, good process of consultation, not only by the panels, but also by civil society, by ourselves. We conducted 2 years of consultation in Mindanao. We evolved a Mindanao People's Peace agenda that we submitted to both panels and even to the Congress. If I remember in the House, when we were invited by the Congressman Rodriguez to present our take on the BBL, it took a full day of presentation, and even Congressman Lobregat wanted to interpolate us, and there was no more time. And they wanted to invite us back for this consultation, but we were already overtaken by Mama Sapa. So the good senator also invited us to this hearing in the Senate for the same reason. But after Mama Sapano, they canceled it, and we were never invited back. And I attended one hearing in the Senate, and while the senator was conducting the hearings, he listened to the League of Governors and Mayors, and they were all for the BBL. And I remember him distinctly saying, "Why do I hear a different tune when what he said right now, he heard it in his consultation, but what he heard in that Senate hearing was the opposite of what he claimed to have heard." So I guess, yes, there were people, of course, who were not consulted. There are certain interests who claim that they were not consulted, but there were a lot of people who were consulted. It may not be ideal, not everybody was consulted, but we feel there was more consultation now than before during the MOA 80 debacle, which was the reason why the Supreme Court struck down the MOA 80. We were fairly consulted. It was not 100% or 101%, but to just say that it was not totally inclusive, I think, begs the question.
Okay. Yes, just very quickly before
we make some clarification about the wali. Wali is not a religious term. Wali is an Arabic term which literally means a guardian. Yes, and it has no religious connotation. In fact, in the original BBL, there is nothing in the function of the wali which connotes any religious function.
Just to be clear about this, Professor, the wali is not a religious
It's
person.
not a religious person.
He can be ano ba tawag,
Yes,
civilian.
he is actually like a head of
The governor general.
yes, governor. In Malaysia, for example, in the national level, we have sultan, and there are states who do not have sultan. They have the governor general or the governor. So they represent the state. So this is actually the function of the wali, even in the original BBL.
Okay,
version.
ceremonial figure.
Ceremonial receive a salary.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So I think there's nothing religious here.
okay. Thank you for Professor. We have to pause for a short break. What is the way forward for the BBL? The final stretch in a moment. Stay with us.